David stayed in the desert desert strongholds, and in the hills of the desert of Ziph. Day after day, Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. While David was at Horesh in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. So Jonathan is going to be here one last time. Don't be afraid, he said. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel. So Jonathan knows it's David. Jonathan has pieced it together enough to know that David is the guy. You will be king over Israel. And I will be second to you. He's not going to be second to him. Jonathan is going to have to die, unfortunately. Jonathan is the tragic figure here, the victim. He does not get to, he has to go down into the grave with Saul. He does not get to move on with David into the new era that's going to form after Saul's death. Even my father Saul knows this. So Saul, at least according to Jonathan here, Saul knows that he can't actually win this fight. The two of them made a covenant before the Lord. Then Jonathan went home, but David remained at Horesh. That's the last time those two guys are going to see each other. Jonathan is not going to be David's second in command someday. He is, at least not physically. Maybe in some spiritual sense, David will always think of Jonathan when he makes his decisions in the future. But Jonathan is going to die with his father in the field of battle, and will not be David's second in command during David's reign as king. The Ziphites went up to Saul at Gibeah and said, Is not David hiding among us in the strongholds of Horesh, on the hill of Hachilah, south of Jeshimon? Now, O king, come down whenever it pleases you to do so, and we will be responsible for handing him over to the king. So these guys are, again, willing to, this is a different group of people, but still, they're willing to hand David over to Saul. They don't want any trouble with Saul's own forces. Saul replied, The Lord bless you for your concern for me. Go and make further preparation. Find out where David usually goes and who has seen him there. They tell me he is very crafty. Find out all about the hiding places he uses and come back to me with definite information. Or come back to me at Nachon, someplace, I guess. Then I will go with you. If he is in the area, I will track him down among all the clans of Judah. He wants more definite information. He thinks he's people, and he wants him to find out specifically where David is. So they set out and went to Ziph ahead of Saul. Now David and his men were in the desert of Maon, in the Arabah south of Jeshimon. Saul and his men began the search, and when David was told about it, he went down to the rock and stayed in the desert of Maon. When Saul heard this, he went into the desert of Maon in pursuit of David. So he's after him. He's going to get him. He's going to get him in one of these caves that he's hiding out in. Saul was going along one side of the mountain, and David and his men were on the other side, hurrying to get away from Saul. As Saul and his forces were closing in on David and his men to capture them, a messenger came to Saul, saying, Come quickly! The Philistines are raiding the land. This close. This close! Then Saul broke off his pursuit of David and went to meet the Philistines. That is why they call this place Selah Hamalokoth, which means Rock of Parting. And David went up from there and lived in the strongholds of En-Gedi. This close. He almost had him. He almost had his hands on David, but for divine providence made sure he had to turn his attention elsewhere right at the critical moment. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, David is in the desert of En-Gedi. So Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of the wild goats. He came to the sheep pens along the way. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave, so they're in that very cave. The men said, "This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you," or today the Lord is saying to you, "I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish." By the way, God never actually said that to David. At least not that we have a record here in the scriptures. They're just saying that. They believe that they're right. And they are. I mean, they are. But they believe that, well, what I mean is that they believe, we would use a phrase today, that they're on the right side of history. That's our common phrase today. They believe that God is with them and not with Saul, which is true. Okay, that much is true. But they're reading into this situation a permission from God that they don't actually have. They have not actually been given permission from God to attack Saul and kill him. But they do know that that David is the one that God has chosen, and that he is the right figure. He's on the right side of history. They know that. So they're reading into this current situation of Saul being in the cave with them, the interpretation that, hey, this is the day that you've been waiting for. But it's not. It actually isn't. God hasn't told them to do this. Then David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Saul must have been pooing. He's going in there to relieve himself, so I'm assuming he's sitting there crouching over taking a dump. And maybe he has a big one that's taking him a while to get all out, huh? Afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lift my hand against him, for he is the anointed of the Lord." With these words, David rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul. And Saul left the cave and went his way. So there was a temptation there. But that's what it was. It was a temptation. It was not a divine providential calling to act. It was a temptation. If David had taken that temptation, if he had acted on it and killed Saul, which apparently he at least thought about doing, because he did go over there and cut off a corner of the robe. And he felt guilty about that later. So apparently the idea did cross his mind that, hey, I can do this now. He resisted that temptation. He didn't resist the urge to at least let Saul know that he was there. But see, if he had, then he would have been taking the throne of Israel by force. And that could have caused some problems for his own legitimacy. Because then it would appear to the rest of the Israelites that David had killed Saul for the sake of getting the throne. And that could have cast a shadow over his kingship that might never have gone away. So then David went out of the cave and called out to Saul. So Saul has left. Saul has left the cave and went his way. And then David went out of the cave and called out to Saul, "My lord the king." When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. He said to Saul, "Why do you listen when men say, 'David is bent on harming you'? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in this cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lift my hand against my master, because he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father," remember, he is his son-in-law, "look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. Now understand and recognize that I am not guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me. And may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you." So he is not going to do this himself. He wants the Lord to avenge him for all the wrongs that Saul has done to him, but he is not going to be the instrument of that vengeance. As the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds, so my hand will not touch you. Against whom has the king of Israel, David's still speaking here, against whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom are you pursuing? A dead dog? A flea? He's talking about himself, obviously. He's trying to convince Saul that it's not worth his effort to come after him. May the Lord be our judge and decide between us. May he consider my cause and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand. David is saying nothing here about taking Saul's place on the throne. Again, this goes back to where we first saw the anointing scene between Samuel and David. I'm not sure if Samuel told David or Jesse or any of them what he was anointing David for. If you read that section carefully, he doesn't actually say that what he's there for, what he's there to do. And I'm not sure if he did tell them what he was there to do exactly. He may have just been consecrating them for some sort of special use. You know, consecration, anointing, he may have just told them he was anointing them for some special use, not necessarily to be king. David doesn't seem to be acting like someone who wants to be king. And like I said a moment ago, it's important to establish that David does not end up taking the throne by force himself, because that will, as he even said here, from evildoers come evil deeds. Like that will cause his entire kingship to bend in the wrong direction. It will cast a shadow over his entire kingship and will have repercussions all the way down the line. So it's important to establish that David was not seeking to become king by force. And I'm not even sure if he was seeking to become king at all. I don't know when he finally does start. I mean, here he has 400 men behind him. Jonathan has told him he's going to be king. But it still doesn't seem at this point as though he's really necessarily seeking that. In fact, he had a chance to do it, and he deliberately passed on it. So, when David finished saying this, Saul asked, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" And he wept aloud. "You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. You have just now told me of the good you did to me. The Lord delivered me into your hands, but you did not kill me. When a man finds his enemy, does he let him go away unharmed? May the Lord reward you well for the way you treated me today. I know that you will surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands." So he knows. So I don't know if he knows at that moment. I don't know if it's, Jonathan indicated that Saul knew this back a couple chapters ago. Okay. Saul has known longer than anybody that he was rejected as king. Samuel told him that privately a long time ago. So Saul has known longer than anybody else that he's been rejected as king, but he hasn't known for certain who his replacement's going to be. Certainly by now, and of course, according to Jonathan, it was a little while ago, and I don't know when exactly it became clear to him that it was going to be David. I think at first he may have just seen David as a potential rival. I'm not sure if he knew exactly that it was going to be David when he first saw David or when David first became popular. He just knew that he was going to have someone else was going to take the throne from him someday, and David just seemed like a logical candidate. And now, of course, he knows it's going to be David. I know that you will surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my descendants, or wipe out my name from my father's family. Because that's what you often did when you became king. If you were not a member of the dynasty of the previous king, very, very, very frequently what you would do is you would seek out every member of that king's dynasty and kill them, so they could not come back and claim the throne for themselves and kill you. That was just how it was. So Saul is asking David not to do that. So Saul gave his oath. So David gave his oath to Saul. Then Saul returned home, and David and his men went up to the stronghold. So David is not going to raise a hand against Saul's descendants. He is going to end up fighting some of them in a civil war for a period of time. But even then, he's going to spare as many of them as he can.